This episode is sponsored by Kendo UI. Kendo UI allows you to build better apps faster. They have a comprehensive library ranging from data grids and charts to buttons and sliders. Plus, you can use their components as plain JavaScript as well as in Angular, React, and Vue. They have a large collection of customizable popular themes like Bootstrap and Material. Go check them out at reactroundup.com/KendoUI. Hey everybody, and welcome to another React Roundup. This week we have on our panel Tara Manicsic.
Hi everybody.
Kent C Dodds.
Hey, it's Kent. Hi.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Quick shout out about React Dev Summit. Probably the week after this comes out, so go get your tickets. We also have a special guest this week, and that's Henrik Joreteg.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Let people know who you are.
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing this whole JavaScript for a while now. I think I spoke at the very first Node Conf. I've been doing this whole really into progressive web apps and single page apps. And recently, I used to be at And Yet. I'm now doing independent consulting. Recently spent 18 months working with Starbucks, helping them ship their new PWA. Written a book called Human JavaScript that some of you may have read, blogging, Twitter, whatever. Working on a second book right now. So just hanging out.
That
Awesome.
book got me through a lot of JavaScript woes. I very much appreciate it.
Well, awesome. I'm so glad you read it. It was useful.
There you go. You're Terra famous.
There you go. That's all I need. I'm done. See you later.
Awesome.
That and ampersand JS. I also use
Yeah. Talk about like wrong timing though. It was like right as React was taking off. I'm like, hey, I fixed everything with Backbone.
Exactly.
Oh, never mind. No one cares about Backbone anymore. All right.
Yeah.
It was appreciated for a while though. We
Good.
Just so you know.
Okay. Well, thank you.
It's funny you bring that up. That's actually how I met Henrik. Was we had him on JavaScript Jabber to talk about And Yet and ampersand JS. So
Yeah. Good times.
Yep. So we brought you on to talk about the Redux-Bundler. I don't know. It has 389 stars on GitHub, so we know people are using it. Do you want to kind of give us the 5-minute or 5-second elevator pitch for the people who aren't familiar with it?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I'm not really trying to get anyone to use it. This is me sharing how I build apps. In fact, the less people use it and file bugs on it, I'm perfectly content with that. This is not me trying to like become open source famous and convince you to use my tools. Basically, I'm trying to just showing how I do things. It essentially it tackles a lot of the problems that people seem to complain about with Redux, with boilerplate, and trying to figure out how to kind of actually structure applications in a way that scales well. If you're familiar with the Redux ducks pattern of kind of lumping things by functionality, you can think of it a bit like a formalized approach to that. So once you've kind of structured everything into these what I call bundles, then it includes a function that basically composes all those bundles together to build an app for you. So it lets you kind of create these discrete chunks of reusable functionality, which is another one that's kind of a headache for a lot of Redux type stuff, is that you've got code sprinkled through all these different files broken up by action creators and selectors and whatever. It's hard to kind of take that chunk of functionality and be like, okay, I'm going to use this in this other app. So by kind of structuring everything into these bundles, then you can kind of compose it all into an app. And all of this happens outside of components. So instead of thinking as of the kind of soup du jour these days seems to be do everything as a component. And I despise the idea of using behavioral components. I don't enjoy that at all. It feels really strange to me. And especially coming from a perspective of trying to build these network independent apps that can operate, like a progressive web app that essentially has a life cycle of its own. I don't want to tie things like data fetching to whether or not a certain component is visible at the time. I don't really care. I want to fetch the data I know I'm going to need and cache it for offline use. So it's really that philosophy of, kind of contain all your application logic into the separate state container, let Redux do its thing, and then just let all your view components, all your UI be really, really, really dumb. So just render stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I got actually a question on that. So one mistake that I see often with people using Redux is they put all of their application, like all their state in Redux, like the error state of their form elements and like everything inside of there, where lots of it could actually be component state. So
totally.
Yeah, can you address that a little bit?
Yes. So I think I guess my rule for that is, if it can be local, leave it local. I mean, there's no reason to inform the entire rest of your app if you have a partially filled form field. I mean, there's nothing useful you can gain from that in another part of your application. So don't extract it out. Just use component state and be happy. But I think a lot of times when you're building an application, there are things the user is going to need, whether or not they're looking at that particular page at that time. And in the normal kind of component tree driven model, there isn't a great place to do that and to keep that up to date, make sure it doesn't get stale, and to cache it behind the scenes and reinflate it from cache, and then, check to see how old it is and whether I should try to fetch it again. And perhaps even the fail if you expect things to fail, which is not the norm on the web, but if we expect, network requests to fail, we start to act a little differently. If we already have some stale data, well, certainly let's not throw that away when we're fetching something else. Let's try to fetch and see what happens. And if we get it back, and let's keep showing what we have. In fact, we don't even have to bother the user with that information. They don't need to know that it's being updated. And if nothing's changed, why tell them, So unless your data is so stale and you can't get new data, then sure, bother the user. Tell them, hey, something's up. I can't show you what you're trying to look at. But there's so much that we can do in this kind of application lifecycle that doesn't involve what's currently on the screen. So I think it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for that type of application development. So that's why I like having this whole separate state tree with, that can essentially run the app in headless mode. I mean, you can almost think of it like a headless browser. You can have it dispatch all kinds of events and do all kinds of stuff to keep itself up to date, and before you even write the UI for the thing. So I really like that model, and it seems to scale well in terms of complexity, and you can do it with tiny amounts of code. I mean, in terms of the actual bundle sizes to do a lot of that type of behavior, if we kind of optimize for building that sort of thing, that portion of your bundle is tiny. So anyway, I love it. I think, there's challenges involved with doing it well. And my sharing of Redux-Bundler is my saying, hey, here's how I handle all these issues that people complain about with Redux, basically.
Some of the things that you're talking about, especially with kind of doing things behind the scenes to help users not have to be bothered with what's happening, reminds me of some of the stuff that's going to be that is happening and going to be happening with service workers, where they are hoping to go along with the trend of not giving you a silent push notification, or it would be a push no notification, right?
Right. Yeah.
Basically being able to make changes behind the scenes without bothering the user. Mm-hmm. How do you see these two things, these kind of relationships working with, or that kind of relationship?
Yeah, sure. I love service workers. I've been a fan since the beginning and have been hacking with them for some time now, but I don't use them for API data typically. And I will use them to cache assets, cache the actual shell that you need to run the application. But I personally tend to shy away from putting user data specifically in there. So many times the applications we're building these days are actually, user specific. We have kind of this app shell, but then we're fetching all this data that's specific to the user. And I just don't like for one, I don't like having to have a service worker to be able to provide that type of functionality. We have IndexedDB that's pretty well supported now. And it's no longer terrible in iOS. And so it's completely usable there to do, provide the same kind of caching functionality there. And even when they add service worker, I like the idea of having this distinction between, user data that is fetched and managed kind of in the app, and then service worker that handles kind of the shell there's enough complexity in the service worker in terms of handling updates properly and, what happens when a new one's available. There's an awful lot you can do there to make a mess anyway. And so I like having, any clean lines of distinction that you can draw. And so for me, I draw the line there.
I actually got one of my talk ideas based on one of your tweets because
oh, really?
I think you were telling somebody that their blog did not need to be a PWA.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a talk now that is, does it need to be a PWA?
Okay, so
for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh man, I feel like I'm getting put on the spot more than I expected to here.
Oh no.
But yeah, I think let our webpage be a webpage. I mean, sure, you can go write something that will go prefetch all your blog posts and make your blog work offline. But realistically, yeah, sure, that makes it more reliable. But in my opinion, there's not a whole lot that you're gaining there. I guess you can have a few prefetch tags if you really want to prefetch your HTML and using HTTP cache headers, and you've essentially got something pretty similar, right? So I don't know. I think I like to build apps. And I have no qualms about saying that there are sites and apps.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very much building apps because these things, I expect them to work offline. I expect them to cache users' data to show them what they last fetched. That's what I'm doing. So whatever that's worth.
So, Tara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing that I got out of your question earlier that I was hoping, maybe I misunderstood your question, but so I'll just ask it. So Henrik, I agree with you that it's kind of nice to have the service worker be for the app shell and then the IndexedDB or something to be for where you store offline user data.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing about service worker is that it can run in the background. And so can you see any use case where it'd be useful to have a service worker run in the background to keep the user information up to date so that the next time I pull open this app, all of the information is up to date without having to wait for that data to load? Like maybe I only pull up this app when I'm on the train in a tunnel or something.
Sure. I mean, you certainly could do that. It's, again, by structuring your application where all this data fetching happens in this kind of separate entity, you have that option. I have a demo where the entire application in terms of Redux, these bundles, everything runs in a worker, not a service worker, a regular worker. And to do that, because of the way the code is structured, I have two example apps out there. One of them is the Redux-Bundler example, and the other one is Redux-Bundler worker example. And the only difference between the two is an adapter that you slip in there to basically do the communication between the worker and your main thread. I mean, literally, that's the only difference. You didn't have to change any other code to make that work. And so you can do the same thing. You can throw it in a service worker. Sure, why not? Fine. But I think, most of the time, you're probably okay, checking the network a bit when you open the app, as long as you start with what they had last. I think you got to be respectful of users' battery life, and there's limits to how much you can do behind the scenes anyway. But I think, the point is by structuring things this way, you have the option. So
cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, so I want to know a little bit more about Redux-Bundler and its use cases. It sounds like it's really good for being able to have a clean separation between application state and the UI. But you don't, like you said, you don't shove all of the state in this thing. It's just application state, not
right.
State, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about using any abstraction, we're talking about solving a problem and incurring a cost to solve that problem. And hopefully the benefit for solving that problem is worth more than the cost.
Right.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about Redux-Bundler and what the associated costs and benefits are to using it.
It's probably hard for me to pick it apart too much, given the fact that it's how I like to build things. So it's hard to be really fully objective about that. But I think, for me, at the point where you need Redux, you're introducing a lot of things to your app, and to me, this just makes that less painful.
Can you talk about, really, sorry to interrupt, could you
No, please.
At what point do you need Redux? Like, what makes it so you need Redux?
Personally, I use Redux for things that most people probably would not. I don't use React Router. I put URL state into Redux. I don't, so all of my apps at least do that in Redux. And then, I like anything that spans more than one component. I think, at that point where you need something that's external to just this little thing in this one piece, then I think it makes sense to introduce something like this. And especially if the cost is low enough in terms of file size, bundle size, complexity. I think it's helpful. Especially at the point now. I mean, I've kind of got this toolkit now, these little bundles that I can just throw in there, and voila, here's an app. And I think that's makes me more productive, and without adding a huge, cost to my bundle size, et cetera. So, I think, I'm rambling at this point, but
that's okay. There's a lot to be said for what you're familiar with, like what's the team used to using.
Totally.
Like the more that you're familiar with it, the less of a cost an abstraction is.
Absolutely.
And so that, oh shoot, I had like an insight and now it's like floating away. So,
oh no.
Chuck, I need you to save me. Tara, somebody.
Well, I was
talking.
One thing that kind of made me think when you're saying that you have this distinguishable point where you say, I don't want this to be a part of how I'm building it. Is there a way that you got to understanding React and what you use in React to know how you wanted to split it and how you preferred to split it?
Okay, let me try to answer that. I think can you rephrase that just a little bit? I don't know if I quite follow what you're getting at.
I guess so. Like it took me quite a while to get to a point in React where I would even needed Redux because what I was building and how I was building things out with state. And so I think it helps to understand like how you split things up with Redux. The way that you got there to say to yourself, like, I don't want to use the React router, like, and split things off and make it so modularized. Like, was it just as you were learning, you were going through and you were learning, or were there certain things that tipped you off to how the performance was or how things worked together that made you make those decisions?
I think over the years, there's just patterns that I've grown to enjoy and appreciate at scale. Having built really large, complex backbone applications, this idea of separating out, and even going back to like Mustache.js and this whole concept of like logic-less templates, right? Where like you have these clear lines in your application, and React to me is just another UI layer. Like, I don't want that to be my entire application. I mean, sure, you can say that it's a React app, but like, I think when I say that means something different than when somebody else says that, because I use it largely as a glorified templating language that lets me very easily nest components. And again, I tend to lean toward React because I don't, it's 3 kilobytes. Like, why wouldn't I do that? So I'm not like your average React fanboy. I think a lot of that just comes from my past, I guess. But I think, I get a little twitchy when I see people start to write a lot of application code. What I view as something that's very kind of broad as part of just a component that's just responsible for rendering that one thing. As an example, so I have this little online donation platform that I built called speedy.gift. And essentially, I had kind of thrown together this proof of concept app, and I had a few users using it. And the UI was it had this nice little like designed by a developer sort of feel to it. And because I didn't want to bother, spending money on a designer until I could kind of prove that this thing was worthwhile. But basically, I could then take this application, completely throw out the UI, and start from scratch. In like a matter of a week or two, like a week and a half, I think it took me to completely replace the front end of this application, because it's just a bunch of templates, and it's just a matter of like hooking up to the right pieces. Like most people you can't do that unless you've architected your app a certain way. And, you can't, it's just not an option. Like it's so much intertwining of application logic and display logic. And, I like having those lines of separation because I know what it buys me. So
I appreciate that a lot. And I think I really admire the way that you code, and I like that a lot. And I try to code that way. And that's why Human JavaScript was kind of an insight into that. So it's interesting to see how you react kind of in that way as well.
Right. Well, thank you.
I think where I'm still struggling a little bit is just I'm trying to envision, if I have this problem, Redux-Bundler is going to solve this for me. Like if I've written code in a particular way, the organization that Redux-Bundler is going to clarify or make easier my code. Or is this something that is kind of painful to bring into a larger Redux app, and you're better off just starting from scratch with it?
Yeah, I think it would be a little bit hard to kind of inject it after the fact. I mean, you could certainly start to do that, but I think it kind of wants to own, again, and this was not me writing some open source tool that I'm hoping everybody will just like switch to and adopt. Like it's mainly showing patterns and things that I think make a lot of sense. And these are things that we've used, the basic, several of the ideas in Redux-Bundler, although Redux-Bundler itself was not used at Starbucks, like some of these ideas came from the work we did at Starbucks in a large app that was already written. And so kind of taking this process of extracting application logic that was really causing a lot of issues and refactoring it out into this kind of separate thing that manages this stuff. So, I do think it would be a little bit tricky to kind of inject it into an existing Redux app, especially since a lot of people are using a mixture of kind of these add-on tools already, everything from Redux Loop to Redux Saga or what have you for async stuff, along with React Router, which kind of wants to own URL state already. And so there's kind of it's really more like a presentation of a bunch of ideas and it is in fact how I build apps, so it's usable certainly, but for me the thing that it solves is quite a few things, but one of the big things is this whole idea of, maybe a concrete example would be more useful. So say you have an authentication system for an app, for a certain API. Like there's a certain way that you have to authenticate in order to get this API to work. And you're using just plain Redux for this. And so there's a bunch of logic that you need to write, essentially a way to trigger authentication to, whether that be fetch a token or what have you, whatever needs to happen there. You might get redirected back to the app, and then you need to read something from the URL that got returned by the server. And then so there's all this kind of logic around how this application authenticates with OAuth or whatever it happens to be, right? How can you take that chunk of logic and just drop that into another app? Like the way most things are written, you can't do that because it's also intertwined. Like in like you have this kind of, but like now I've written this auth bundle for my Speedy platform that I use for 3 or 4 different apps. And they literally take that code and put it into like a shared pattern library thing and then just use that bundle and I'm good. Like, because it knows how to read its URL, it knows how to do all this stuff. And I end up with selectors in there that I can use that say is logged in. That's all I really need to know. Like my app needs to know, do I have a user or not that I can show their name in the thing, or do I need to kick them out? Or do I need to, because their session expired, do I need to wipe the caches and redirect them out to sign in again? Like, I don't know. It's just hard to encapsulate non-UI logic. Like the problem of like a date picker is solved. Like if I want to drop in some date picker, like there's a million component architectures that allow that, but reusing these larger kind of structural logical pieces of application code is really difficult the way we build most things.
That makes sense. The reason that I see for that is mostly that, we build in the coupling, but since the coupling isn't painful. It's not making it hard to change the code. A lot of people won't notice it. But yeah, if you want to move it somewhere completely different where it doesn't have this reliance on code that you've written, right? Because if it relies on another library, you just pull that library in. But if it relies on another part of the app, then it's a problem. This does remind me, though, of an app that I built earlier in my career where we kind of wrote this big monolithic application and realized that everything was way too tightly coupled. Everything depended on everything else. And so, we were smart. We decided to rewrite it in, this was back-end code, so we decided to write it in microservices. Well, what we wound up with was a whole bunch of loosely coupled messes that talked to each other instead of one giant mess that was one big ball of yarn. So how do you approach that so your bundles don't just turn into little kingdoms that are also a mess?
I mean, there's no tool, library, or system out there that will save you from making a disaster of your code base. I mean, it just doesn't exist. Like, there's certain like hygiene that you just basically have to develop over time, where you get a sense of, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this way. And I think that's one of those things that just takes some experience after you've. I've done an awful lot of refactoring in my life, and so I tend to optimize for things that are easy to change after the fact. Kind of been brought in as a fixer on applications at various points in my life. And one example, there was somebody had written a jQuery soup app of literally, I think he had 4,000 lines of jQuery code in a single file, using the the 10,000 foot view that you get in VS Code or Sublime Text, where you can kind of see the whole thing. He used really large ASCII art in comments to be able to identify sections of that giant file from that 10,000 foot view.
Oh, that's such a
creative.
Which is phenomenally brilliant as a way of like handling this. But at the same time, you can imagine that it was not the easiest thing to debug and make sense of, right? So I think
I'm still impressed.
Yeah, I know. It's really clever. I mean, this guy was no fool. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make fun of him. I've done the same type of thing with less brilliance in terms of solving that part of the problem.
Right? Like ingenuity out of chaos.
Totally. And the thing is that it works. Like you can do that. There's, but I think over time you learn that kind of thing maybe isn't going to buy the flexibility that you need down the road. When there's a bug or when somebody needs a new feature and you're like, I have no idea where to even put that thing because this thing is already a leaning tower, right? So I don't know.
I think a lot of that comes out of not. I know a lot of teams, and I may have been on a few where you have to build a project, and there's so much out there. There's all of these choices that you can make to make things happen, and you tend to throw things together, not even realizing how things may overlap or come through. And so, does this feel like a tool? Does the Redux-Bundler help kind of people get to a point of just like, here's one thing that we can use to kind of get rid of a lot of the clutter?
I think it's a good solution for eliminating a lot of boilerplate in Redux, especially if you have the option of starting from scratch, because it gives you these kind of little building blocks. I think the ideal state of development is Legos. I think everybody can appreciate the joy of just like having these little bricks that have certain functions and just building something beautiful out of them. But the question is, what are those bricks? And all these different frameworks provide different mechanisms for kind of, they provide a few bricks of their own, and then you build some of yourself. You bring some yourself maybe, but they like how do we get to that state of with not just UI code but with logic? And the common answer is we'll just write a generic JavaScript library that does that one thing. And that's fine, but that also means you have to glue that into your application somehow. And so you may be kind of gluing in all these various different libraries, and it's fine to do that. It totally works. But the thing I typically want, once I kind of go, okay, I'm building this app with Redux, then I want to be able to select things out of that state from Redux. I don't want to have to grab some piece of state from the URL and then something else from a library and then something else from Redux to figure out what to show you. Like, it's nice to be able to kind of mirror the state that you care about into Redux and then be able to just select the one thing that you need out of there. So
for you, the listeners of Ruby Rogues, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. So you talked about the bricks and the ways that you organize this and, making it talk nicely with Redux. What do your bundles actually look like then? Are they just a collection of functions or reducers or what?
What's that? So the last part?
I was just saying, are they just a collection of functions or reducers then, or is there more to it?
Yeah, totally. So you export an object. I should have said this up front. Sheesh. I'm not. It's not trying to market you here. So you export an object, and an object, they at least have to have a name, but they can have a reducer, and then any key that starts with the word select is assumed to be a selector. Any key that in that object that starts with do is assumed to be an action creator. You can also add an init function if you need to kind of instantiate something when it first boots up, and that init function will be handed the entire store once it's been created. So if you need to do things like you want to set up a window resize event listener that then mirrors that state into Redux, you have a way to do that and still write it in the bundle. Like, it can just be, or if you want to set up a service worker, you want to register a service worker and have the service worker be able to dispatch action saying, hey, we have a new service worker available. It gives you a way to encapsulate that type of logic as well. But then what you end up with, what Redux-Bundler actually does is it takes all these bundles, and then instead of having you have to import selectors wherever you want to use them, it's because it already knows that at the time that it essentially composes all these, it will compose them, bind them, and attach them to the store itself. So what you end up with is a store that has a ton of select functions on it that are just attached to it. And it has a bunch of do functions on it that will trigger, that are pre-bound action creators that will trigger all your actions. So as a result, you end up with this really more complete store. If you think about it, that's basically what Redux does with reducers anyway, right? Like, we write functions and it kind of folds that into what becomes the Redux store. This is just taking the same approach to action creators, selectors, and kind of formalizing that as well. But what you end up with then is this really metadata-rich store that knows about all its action creators, that knows about all its selectors. You can write really interesting debugging tools that will show you the state of things at various times, or so you have kind of this mechanism of, and the thing is, the way that we bind Redux to a view, React component, is with connect, right? So that's a very manual process of extracting the store from context, and then tying in all these selectors and binding the action creators, what have you. Like, if the store already has all that stuff, all you got to do is pluck some methods off of it and call them, right? It's the connect function becomes super, super, super simple. You literally just give it strings because everything's named. So you have, select user will give you a user prop. Do log out will give you a do log out prop. And by listing them as strings, you don't have 50 million imports at the top. And then when you decide to shuffle files around, you got to fix all those paths, right? Not to mention, it's not exactly free to require tons and tons of modules. I mean, there's been test cases demonstrating that, even just walking the dependency tree in a Webpack build or that can take some time, there's some actual processing going on there. So it dramatically simplifies the process of connecting data from your Redux store into your components.
And just to be clear, this connect function is not the React Redux, but it's a connect function for your.
Yep. I wrote my own because that's one of the things that actually frustrated me the most is like that's the part where things get ugly in Redux, in my opinion, is like you have these beautiful like state change mechanisms. You have this like it all makes perfect sense, and then you're like, okay, I want to actually use this in a React application. Okay, so I got to import all these selectors. I got to import all these action creators. I got to bind the action creators. Make sure I call them something different so I don't confuse myself and don't shadow variable names. And before you're done, like you've added so much stuff just to be able to extract useful information out of your application state. So that's where I saw a lot of people, to use Starbucks as an example, a lot of people that were getting onboarded onto the new React Redux stuff. There was a lot of confusion around what Connect does, how it works, and what's going on with these select functions, etc.
So I've got a question. I'm just looking at some of the code examples, and one of the things that really kind of bothers me with Redux is when I come into an application that's built with Redux, if I'm not the one who built it, or even if I am, if I see like an event is happening, like I click on this button and it's dispatching something, then I go find the action creator, and then I find all the reducers, and by the time I'm all done, I have like 7 files open trying to figure out what on earth is going on.
Totally.
And so that whole process is like created because of the indirection of Redux, and there are benefits to indirection. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be like wickedly frustrating.
Totally.
Just trying to figure out like the code path of certain events. And so looking at this, I think it looks like it sort of helps with that problem a little bit. But one thing that I'm a little concerned about is the connect function. It takes these strings, and when the Redux-Bundler composes all of my bundles together, there's no way for me to really know like where each one of these actions or where these selectors are coming from.
Sure.
I just have to like use a convention, and convention always kind of scares me a little bit because we have a million conventions for CSS, and nobody follows their convention properly anyway.
Right.
So what can you say about that? Like, as I've never used Redux-Bundler, so I can't really say from experience, but what's been your experience for people using Redux-Bundler or yourself? And the like debugging story, like this is actually another reason that I'm not a huge fan of middleware with Express, because I look at my request object or my response object and it has a user property. Like where
did that come from?
Yeah, where did that come from? Exactly. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
So anyway, just say words about that, please.
Words about that. Okay, so first of all, in terms of like convention, like you can't not follow the convention because it doesn't work. So if you don't export your selectors starting with the term select, they won't be recognized as selectors. So that kind of, you can't not do that and still have it work. As far as using strings to pull it in, the nice thing is it blows up as soon as if you reference something that doesn't exist. Like we know that because we know the store has everything, and if you try to connect it to something that doesn't exist, we can be like, hey, that doesn't exist. Search for this phrase. And it's not going to, it's pretty obvious that something blew up. And so, the big fear around like, and I used to write Python. They're big on being very explicit about everything. That's part of the whole thing. And explicitly importing things so you know where they're coming from makes a lot of sense. But in my experience, in terms of practical use, a little bit of convention here can go a really long way towards eliminating a lot of headaches and indirection. So for me, it's worth it. Like, yeah, there's a cost there in that you can't go trace a file path. But my file structure is like a folder of bundles, a flat folder of bundles. That's it. Like it's in one of those. It's not like there's this crazy nested mess of stuff. Like, because you can isolate them into chunks, it's pretty easy to just have each file as one bundle and go from there.
So if you were in a code base you're not familiar with, you see this thing that says like do login or something like that, then you just grep for do login inside your bundle folder, and you find it pretty quick.
Yeah, totally.
Do you ever find situations where there are like name clashes, or like?
Well, if so, I would certainly want to raise that awareness. I don't think we throw for that, right? I mean, I don't think it explodes if two bundles tried to, I think it would just overwrite each other. But I mean, I would want to know, you know, and I think, I think it's, I could throw more helpful errors there. Again, this isn't me trying to build some general purpose tool for everybody, and this is just one of those things you got to be aware of and be cautious of, I suppose.
Well, it sounds like Redux-Bundler really solves quite a few of the pains that I've had with Redux personally. So I think it's pretty cool. So in Redux applications where I'm using Redux, I might consider giving that a look. So thanks
check it out.
Thanks for sharing that with the open source world.
No worries.
I'll be sure to file all the bugs that I find. And
please do. No, I don't mind legitimate bugs. It's just I don't want to, I do paid consulting work. I don't want to spend my time like doing free consulting for everybody, because that's not why I'm open sourcing it. So, but there's like, but I think there's enough stuff there that is genuinely useful that I want people to be aware of as alternatives in terms of mechanisms for handling complexity. So, whatever that's worth.
One thing that I'm wondering about here too, and this is more on the philosophy of organizing your code as opposed to, necessarily what Redux-Bundler does, but how do you decide what to bundle together? I mean, you can look at a whole bunch of different ways that people or things organize. So, do you collect them as far as, well, this deals with everything having to do with images, and this one deals with everything having to do with log in, log out, or user profiles. And then what if it's a profile image? Where do you put that? And so I can see like all of these different sort of orthogonal concerns that something might fall into 2 or 3 of them. So how do you start to break this apart?
Sure. I tend to go with kind of big chunks of functionality. So for example, like I said, there's an auth bundle, and there's a, if I have a collection of users that's being displayed somewhere, there will probably be a users bundle in there somewhere that fetches that and keeps that state up to date. They can depend on each other. I actually, I don't know if any of you used reselect much at all to create selectors? See, I feel like this is like the missing piece of all Redux applications is like, we have a way to read, and we have a way to kind of cause action changes and whatever, but we don't have a great way in Redux itself to extract useful information out of our application state. And so people do crazy things like store derived state in their Redux stores because they don't know what else to do with it. The logical way, and I keep referring to selectors, but like these are all things created with a library called reselect that essentially expects you to treat your state the way that Redux does. Now I'm getting off on a tangent, so stop me, Chuck, if I'm completely ignoring your question. Sorry. That's not my goal. All right, keep going. All right. So I think, bundling things around that makes a lot of sense. But if you're building up complex logic trees in terms of you want to know things that are derived from multiple areas in your application, you want to derive some answer to a question about your application state, there's times when you're going to want to reference different things from different bundles, right? Mm-hmm. And so in the same way that you can reference, you can connect things by name, you can actually reference other selectors from other bundles by name. So you don't actually have to have them directly tied to each other. Now, Redux-Bundler, the way that it has 2 different composition functions that it exposes. One of them is the raw one that it uses internally, and one of them is one that bundles a bunch of the stuff that I think you're probably going to want to use already, but it still just uses the same thing. But there's a built-in URL bundle that essentially does the 2-way binding between the browser's URL bar and your Redux state, and lets you do things like read the query parameters as an object from using a selector from your URL bundle. And so there's tons of stuff in your app that's probably going to want to reference some aspect of routing or URL stuff. And so in those scenarios too, you can reference that stuff in a selector as well. So say, for instance, you have a users page and you want to fetch users on that page. Well, if you're not directly calling fetch users from the component of that user's page, then you might ask, well, how the heck do I trigger that? Well, you have URL as part of your state. So you can just in a selector say, hey, am I currently on this page? If so, then fetch it. And you can choose to do that optionally. So it can be like something that you decide to tie to a particular URL, but it's not required. It's not that way by default. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So anyway, to answer your question, large chunks of functionality.
I think I'm going to try and restate what you said there a little bit, and that is that, if it's part of the same functionality, that's the stuff that you put in a bundler. And the thing that came to mind when you were talking about it is, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the solid principles by Uncle Bob Martin.
Not at all.
But the S in the solid principles is the single responsibility principle.
Oh,
and the thing that really blew me away when I finally understood that principle was that Uncle Bob, he gave this talk, and I was like, oh, well, everything in here should be part of doing the same job, which, you're saying large chunks of functionality is kind of the same thing. But I heard him give a talk, and in the talk he said what he meant by that was that it was all likely to change at the same time, because you're working on the user's list, and so it's all likely to change as you work on the user's list. And then, the other class or bundle or, set of functions or object or however you think about it in JavaScript, same thing, right? It's likely to change at the same time because it's managing similar state and similar transforms on that state. And so if we're talking about that kind of a thing, then what we're saying is that it may not look like it goes together when I squint at it, but when I'm working on it, I'm going to be making those changes all at the same time because they're all related to the same functionality in my application.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, it's shared concerns in that sense. Yeah. I mean, they're kind of inextricably linked.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I know that you talk a bit about reactive programming, and like that's kind of like the basis for React, like the popularization of React and why React was big. In the Redux-Bundler, you have reactors.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you talk about those a little bit? Yeah.
So this is going to be. Let's talk spreadsheets. Okay. So I know this seems really tangential, but it will come right back around to what you're saying. So, yes, if you think about containing complexity and the way that a spreadsheet works is that you have a few inputs and then you can derive all manner of information from that. And this is what I do with selectors. And so any one of those cells, instead of just referencing a piece of raw data, can reference another cell. It can be a computer result from another cell. So that's what reselect lets you do. It lets you build these complex trees of selectors to derive increasingly complex answers. Now, and you can do that without requiring a lot of complexity in the end cell, if you will. The final formula just says add this cell and this cell. Like, it doesn't need to have but by doing that, you inherently contain all the complexity that was used to derive those two complex answers, perhaps, right? But ultimately, all you want to know is, should I do something based on this information or not? And so the ability to basically treat your state as a spreadsheet is probably the most powerful tool I've ever discovered in my years of development for managing and containing complexity in a client-side application. Because what you can do is you can kind of build the chunks upon chunks upon chunks and end up with really high-level answers to hard-to-answer questions that inherently contain all the logic required to derive that information. So once you get to that point, you kind of want to use that for everything. So what I've done with this concept of reactors is a special kind of selector that if it returns something, dispatch what it returns. So as a result, then instead of just deriving whether or not to show that the user is logged in, it derives whether or not we should trigger the user to get logged in. Or to get logged out because they just failed. We just got an authorization failure on an API request. Their session's expired. We need to boot them out. Like there are conditions in your app that cause other things to occur, and this has been really powerful because you can do things like create these kind of self-healing systems. Because as long as you store enough metadata about the request that occurred, if it fails, you can write selectors that say, hey, if this failed 5 minutes ago, try it again. Right? And that's exactly what you can do with these reactors, is you can essentially react to certain states to cause other things. One simple example for this is once you have your URL state in Redux, there's times when you're going to want to have internal redirects, essentially. So I create a little redirects bundle that has a single reactor that describes all the cases in which I want to redirect somebody to a different page. That could just be cleaning up the URL. That could be, hey, they're actually logged out, so we should boot them to the separate site entirely. Being able to kind of not just react in terms of deriving some increasingly complex data, but actually cause something else to occur is really magical when you see it in action. Because so one example was so one of the prototypes for Starbucks that I was working on was this idea of showing, and stop me if I'm babbling too much. I don't know what time we have or whatever. So was this they wanted to have this little like now playing card. So whatever was current music was currently playing at a given Starbucks store, if you were in that store. So here we have a web application that needs to somehow figure that out, right? And I was like, this is a cool challenge. Like, let's see if we can actually do this on the web. And they have good APIs in place for like fetching what's the nearest store to this set of coordinates. But there's an enormous number of things that have to go right for this to work. And you should really expect many of them to fail. Like, do we have a user permission to request their geolocation? If it does, okay, did we get it? Is it accurate enough? Are we currently asking for user location? If so, we certainly don't want to ask again. Okay, we got it. Is it accurate? Is it within our accuracy threshold? Okay, now let's then trigger a fetch to the nearest store. Let's like call that API to see what's the closest store to this location. Okay, based on my accuracy and my tolerance for error, can I safely assume that this person is in this store? Yes or no? Okay, well, maybe they probably are. Okay, sure enough. Let's do the next thing. Now we can trigger an API call to say, hey, does this store have the capabilities to tell me what music is currently playing? And that might not work. The user might be pulling their phone out. It might be trying to connect to the in-store Wi-Fi and be in a total like fake Wi-Fi situation. It's very likely to happen, in fact. In fact, very many of these things are very likely to fail. And so, like, how do you even build a system that can, like, resiliently plow through that and ultimately finish? Well, the way you do it is you store metadata about what you're trying to do, and you use that state to trigger other things. And so, we're able to do something that's extremely resilient to that failure, and that could retry things behind the scenes. And even if you sat there and refreshed during the process of it trying to do this, it would still pick up and keep going where it left off, because anytime it succeeded, it would cache that locally. I mean, so you end up with this like I don't even know how to build that kind of system without a spreadsheet type model in your head. Like, I don't know how you'd go about doing it in a way that was fault tolerant and resistant enough to handle that amount of failure. And I think so that that kind of example just goes to show what's possible. When somebody comes with a really complex feature, most of us are like, I don't know. But if you can do it like a spreadsheet where you're like, all right, this cell gives me this piece of the answer, this cell gives me this piece of the answer. Combined, I can tell you this piece of the answer. I can trigger this thing, or I can do this thing. And all of a sudden, really complex things can be done without ripping your hair out.
That's really awesome. They immediately kind of thought like selector promises of some sort, Yeah,
essentially. I mean, you basically, so the way it works is it will run those. So if you export a reactor from your bundle, when any action is dispatched, it will run those special selectors on the resulting state. And the first one that returns something, it will then schedule that to be dispatched with a request idle callback. So as a result, you don't get it interrupting anything else. It's performant in that way, but that's like the next logical effect to occur. And by doing it that way, you can kind of build these self-resolving logic trees that ultimately give you the answer you're looking for in a really reliable manner.
So it's almost kind of like messaging, where it's like your messaging software would like try it. like RabbitMQ or something like that, where you're basically trying to get these things. Man, that's awesome.
It works really well. And I mean, I think the spreadsheet model is the best way to really think about it. And that's the classic functional reactive programming example anyway, right? And I think React kind of does that for the UI portion, like tell me what to render with this certain state. But I think we're still taking very simplistic approaches to data fetching on that side of things. I think we can apply similar principles to kind of give us that level of, give our apps that kind of smarts, if you will. So
that's awesome.
Anyway, I think they're cool. I really like it as a means of containing complex logic.
Yep. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. When I read that, I was like, because I read it in your documentation, and it was just like, hold on, what is this? This is awesome. Yeah. And
I know it looks weird and it's a little bit strange at first, but again, by keeping Redux's principles of kind of dispatching a single thing that leads to, like it's really easy to trace back too, like as you see it all happening in the console. Nice. You have action after action getting dispatched, and the way that I wrote a little debug bundle for Redux-Bundler too that will show you whatever the next action it's going to trigger. So, as a result, you can kind of track it down just by scrolling back up in your console and see what happens.
Nice. That's great.
Super cool.
Anyway.
All right. Well, I have an appointment with my accountant to get my taxes done. So I'm going to start pushing this toward picks. Is there anything that we really need to cover, though, before we do that?
Is your accountant using Excel to look at reactive programming?
QuickBooks? Not quite the same thing.
I knew I had a refund coming this year, so I did my taxes as soon as I possibly could. So I'm done.
Yeah, when you work for well, wait a minute, you do work for yourself. So how did you get the refund?
Huh? Well, I have to pay like quarterly, whatever. To the IRS.
I see.
They make me do it. Now it's biweekly, actually, but
yeah, I pay monthly, so maybe I will get money back. All right. Anyway, that was a fun tangent.
That's my pick for today.
My
refund.
Get a CPA.
There you go. Tara, why don't you start us off with the picks?
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere. Available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says "Pay me now." And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
So I'm not sure when we're going to air this, but my picks are in relation to International Women's Day. And so 2 resources that I really took advantage both when I was a CS student and then starting my career was Women Who Code. And I am actually started and co-direct now the Cincinnati branch of Women Who Code. So I highly recommend checking out the Women Who Code chapter in your area. And another one is Google has a branch of their Google developer groups of women tech makers who also put on some great talks and resources. And there's a great Slack chat room just to talk to other women in the field and learn from each other, support each other. And with Women Who Code, just a reminder that most all branches do at least one free technical workshop a month. So check that out. That's me, though.
Awesome. Kent, what are your picks?
Sure. So, Tara, I also wanted to pick International Women's Day today. So happy International Women's Day, whatever day it is.
Yay!
Because I think that's wonderful. And in that same spirit, I also want to shout out to girldevelopit.com. They accept donations, and I recommend that you donate to them. It's a wonderful nonprofit organization that gives great opportunities to women in code. So definitely check them out. And then just a blog post that I wrote a little while back that's relevant to today's conversation. It's called Application State Management on my blog, where I reveal to the world that I am actually an average React fanboy, and me wearing my React shirt today.
Hey, I'm not hating on anybody, okay?
No, it's totally cool. No, I feel like React can get us a really long distance in managing our application state. So give that a look. I think it's worth looking at. And then something that I've been working on at work, it's just been on my mind a lot, is this toolkit called PayPal Scripts. It's like if you create React app, what that leaves you with is this React Scripts tool that kind of consolidates a bunch of other tools. So I highly suggest that if you make more than, if your company makes more than a couple apps, then you should probably invest some time into making a toolkit, because it's incredible what you can do with these things. So I've got 2 blog posts about that. The first one's called Tools Without Config. Tools Without Config. And the other one is called Concerning Toolkits. So I'll leave links to those. Toolkits are great. So give that a look.
All right, I'm going to throw a few picks out. First of all, I will confess ignorance. I didn't even know that there was an International Women's Day, but if you're being celebrated, I wish you a happy Women's Day. I don't know how to say that properly, and I probably sound like an idiot, but yeah. The other thing is so anyway, I have other picks because I didn't know. Anyway, so the first pick that I have, last night I just kind of ran out of steam, and I was like, I just need a few hours to myself. So I went and saw Black Panther, and it turns out that if you go at 3 p.m, you really do get to watch it by yourself on a Wednesday. I think there were 4 other people in the whole theater. But anyway, it was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. In other words, it was a Marvel movie, and they blew enough crap up. So nice. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. But yeah, the other thing that I'm going to pick is I guess it's more of an offer for help. I've had a number of people come to me lately and say that they want to start podcasts. And if you're one of those people, I'm happy to help you out. I may eventually put together a course, but for right now, if you want to just steal 15 minutes of my time, just go to devchat.tv/15 minutes. That's devchat.tv/15 minutes. I'll talk to you about anything for 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be podcasting, but, I love hearing from people who are listening to the shows and getting something out of them. So if there's a favorite episode, or you want career advice or anything like that, let me know. The other thing that I'm going to pick, I've decided to put a $100 coupon for my How to Get a Job course into the ticket for React Dev Summit. And in case you're wondering, React Dev Summit costs $150. So, it's essentially you get a $50 ticket for the paid ticket. You're getting $100 off if you're going to buy the other course as well. So, just check that out. Tara and Kent are both speaking. So yeah, it should be great. You can use either of their first names to get 20% off, I think. So definitely check that out. If you don't want to pay, or you're like $150, I don't have $150, you can come watch it for free when it's being streamed live. So, and that'll be the last week in March, which should be next week as this comes out. So definitely check that out. One other thing, if you haven't been to devchat.tv for a while, I have been reworking the theme on there. So I would love feedback. So if you want to just go to devchat.tv or reactroundup.com or anything like that and just check it out, let me know what you think. And then, you can do that by emailing me or whatever. Also, I know that some people play with all of the... Sorry, I'm picking all the things I'm working on. I probably shouldn't.
But I know some people play with a lot of different frameworks. So if you're interested in Angular, we have a podcast on Angular at adventuresinangular.com and one on Vue.js, which we started the same week as the React podcast. And that's at Views on Vue, spelled VUE, the last view.com. So definitely check those out as well.
You didn't call it The View?
I should have. That probably would have gotten confusing, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, Henrik, what are your picks?
You guys have heard me talking this whole time. I'll try to keep it short. Essentially, I think one thing that's really cool is this idea of spaced repetition systems, which if you haven't experienced these, it's this idea that over time, we have these perfect intervals where we should be reminded of a fact in order to remember it. And that's a super interesting way to basically get to pick what you're going to be able to remember when you want to remember it. And there's some cool tools for that out there. One called Anki, A-N-K-I, that I've been using and enjoying for that. So basically random facts, everything from like dates to, formulas to whatever you might want to remember. Essentially the stuff you put into that thing, as long as you keep up with like reviewing your cards for the day, you will be able to recall it on the spot, which is pretty cool. I talked about reselect already. I love reselect. Did I mention I love reselect? Partial JS is another huge favorite of mine right now. And it's just super simple bundling of assets for web apps. And I use it wherever I can because it just removes all the... It's basically zero config build stuff. And it does most of everything what I want it to do. So another one last one is a book that I've just been reading called Deviate. And it's written by a neuroscientist who is super interesting. I won't get into the summary, but essentially it will blow your mind. At least it blew mine, and about how our brains work and what those 86 billion cells of brain matter are doing up there. So anyway, really good book.
Awesome.
That's by Bo Lotto. Is that right? The science.
Yeah. And it's a little weird, but it's good.
I like weird. All right.
Okay.
Nice. Well, Henrik, if people want to see what you're working on these days, maybe you create another Redux-Bundler-ish thing that is super helpful, or they want to hire you because you're not working for Starbucks anymore for one reason or another.
Right. Yeah.
Where is all that stuff?
You can follow me on Twitter. It's just my full name, Henrik Joreteg. And then my blog is joreteg.com, Joreteg. And actually, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. I am working on a book. Like I said, it's on Redux. It's a bunch of patterns in Redux. It's not just like, hey, use Bundler. So it's got two sections. One is like basics, and the other one is kind of getting into patterns. And I'm almost done with it. That will live at reduxbook.com as soon as it's live. So look for that. I will definitely tweet about it when it's out there.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will catch everyone next week.
Okay.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content